Welcome to Feature Fridays. My name is Guy Bartram. I'm the Director of Product Marketing for our cloud providers here at Broadcom. This being the first Broadcom Feature Friday that we're doing. So welcome everyone, and welcome Jay back to Feature Fridays. Thanks for coming along, Jay. Why don't you just introduce yourself again and tell people what you do?
So thanks, Guy. Hello, everyone. My name is Jay, and I'm the product marketing architect for the Cloud Partners core service provider business side of unit. And basically now, as you all might have heard, we are with Broadcom. So going forward, all the strategies and things will be as per the Broadcom, and we will kind of do the marketing based on the Broadcom strategies.
Yeah, that's right. And yeah, so new colors, new logos, new cloud strategy, and obviously keeping on with our core portfolio, Cloud Director. But there is obviously a renewed focus or a really myopic focus actually on Cloud Foundation from Broadcom for our cloud providers. And that's going to be either in that private cloud environment, dedicated environment, or in the shared VCD multi-tenanted environment with kind of VCF underneath as the infrastructure. But today we're going to talk about Cloud Director and 10.5.1 release. Jay, this is like a huge release. Why was it
So,
a
yeah,
dot release?
I don't know. I mean, trust me, if you look at the number of features they have put in this .1 release, it's equivalent to a major release. But yeah, I mean, as we dive into, you'll understand how big this release is, though it's a dot release. But I mean, the features we have incorporated and enhanced will make it a big difference from the way we offer services to the customer and how the existing features can be better utilized from a functional perspective.
Yeah, cool. So we're going to run through this today, PowerPoint, high level, but we're
Yeah.
going to need to do some follow-ups where we'll get access to labs and kind of run through each specific thing. Because just a warning to everyone, right? There's a lot here.
Yeah, there's a lot here. It's difficult to demo everything for this session. So we'll
Yeah.
quickly look at, like you said, right? Quick overview of each feature, real quick, and then maybe we'll dive into certain important offerings later in other recording sessions.
Okay, let's dive into it, Jay.
All right then. So as you see, we will now talk about the 10.5 feature updates, 10.5.1 feature update. So quickly, we'll look at the marketing overview from an offering perspective, what we have. And then, of course, we'll look at the technical updates based on each pillar, what VCD offers. And then we look at the interoperability and the upgrade path of this version. So from a marketing updates perspective, we have a new offering which the service providers can offer to their customer, which is basically bring your own encryption. So we now allow the end customers of the service providers to bring their own encryption server or use their own encryption key. We'll look into it in a little more in detail when we get to the respective topic. But yeah, this is an offering which is now enabled in this from this version onwards.
Okay.
And from the modern applications perspective, we now have the capability to offer Kafka as a service to the customers. Basically, it's a live streaming database which can be now offered to your end customer based on their needs. And from the technical updates, we'll now look at all the technical updates, and to get an overview of what we'll speak in through this hour, you can look at the blog as well and understand it from the overview perspective. So if you look at the networking updates, right, we divide the networking updates into three pillars. One is the provider gateway updates, one is the edge gateway updates, and the core networking. Wherever you see N, it means it's a new feature, and E, it's an enhanced feature, okay?
Yeah.
So let's first dive into the provider gateway services feature, what have been enhanced and or introduced. So the first feature we'll talk about is route advertisement. This was available in the previous release as well. However, in this version onwards, we now kind of have the capability to how we can configure this setting for the intent of how the tenants can see the advertisements from the tenant portal. Basically, from this version, we have a better visual of how our traffic will flow after we have configured the route advertisement. It will show basically in graphic and the flow of the packets based on the network configuration. And as a provider, you now have the capability to expose this route viewing capability to the customers based on 3 parameters. Basically, you can keep it to strict, flexible, or show all the networks. So based on how you want, you can expose this feature from a view perspective to the tenants. And as a provider, you yourself can look at the packet flow in a better graphical view.
Okay, so this is going to allow providers to do a little bit more control on what they expose to the tenants, right, in terms of the route advertising.
Tenants, yeah, so that they can see things by themselves and configure the network accordingly, rather than communicating with the provider again and again. Yeah. So we now expose the capability based on the options, and then the tenant can see the option from their tenant gateway, tenant portal itself. Okay. And then the other capability what we have introduced is the NAT and firewall from the provider gateway. Previously, if you all understand and know that NAT and firewall was only configurable on the edge gateway, but now as a provider, you can define at which all layer, when I say layer, which all gateways this option can be configured. And from this version onwards, we now support configuring NAT and firewall on the provider gateway. So in that way, what will happen? As a provider, you can basically configure a NAT rule. Say, for example, you have to basically share, you have to configure a service for a, let's say, shared internet service, right? So in that case, the outgoing NAT rules and the firewall rules will be same, right? So in that way, what you can do is you can configure the NAT and firewall rule on the provider gateway, expose that to the edge gateway. In that way, you have the capability of not allowing or not letting the tenants configure these settings, and you configuring these NAT and firewall on the T0 itself, which is your provider gateway, and allowing all the tenants to use the same configured NAT and firewall gateway. And so, again, yeah.
Sorry, this is really really important for like shared services then. So instead of configuring them on every customer edge, you'll configure it once, like backup or internet services, like you said. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And as a provider gateway, you can define whether you want the option to be configurable on the provider gateway, edge gateway, or both of the gateway types.
Okay, cool.
And the other one is the BGP permission group. This is a new feature where we have introduced a new role. Basically, if you look at the fourth picture, it says manage limited provider gateway BGP. So this is a new role which we have introduced in this version, through which we can now control to which tenant you want to expose the BGP settings, right? So previously, right, the BGP configuration was only possible to be viewed by the provider admin. But now with the BGP permission groups, you can expose those BGP settings, whether you want the tenant to be able to edit the BGP configuration or just view the BGP configuration. The condition here is that for you to be able to use this option, the provider gateway must be dedicated, meaning it must be a private provider gateway, because of course, right, say for example, I have, in general, what happens, I have the provider gateway, which is a shared service, but with this feature, since it's a dedicated provider gateway, it's a requirement, what I can do is, as a provider, within the same organization, I have multiple OBDCs. I can ask, or rather I can give the BGP edit permissions to the IT organization within the company, and give the view permissions to other departments within the company. So what will happen if in case certain things go bad while the tenant is configuring the BGP settings, it is just that organization which will get impacted, right? And that's the reason we are only allowing this feature on the dedicated provider gateway, where we can expose the settings based on the permission group. And of course, the respective tenant user must have this view or manage roles assigned to their username. And with the BGP itself, we have another enhancement wherein now we can configure the BGP settings either from the provider portal or from the tenant portal based on the setting what we configure here, right? The user setting.
Yeah.
We can now also configure the BGP settings through the tenant portal. So this screenshot, what you see is from the tenant portal where the user have the capability to view or edit the BGP configuration.
So basically, this is really useful for like your
Yeah.
larger tenants who are slightly more operational savvy and have their own kind of BGP requirements. You can, in other words, you can either provide them kind of complete control over their BGP environment,
Yes.
or you can provide a certain level of admin and provide them view, or
Right.
there's various different ways you can carve this up now, basically.
Right. So how I look at this is basically, since this is for a dedicated provider gateway, right? Which means this provider gateway will be used by a single organization, right? So within the organization, I can give the IT department the full managed access for the BGP option and not give other departments the managed access. And in that way, as a service provider, I don't take the headache of configuring BGP. I let the orgs IT department do the settings and configure it for themselves the way they want it.
Yeah, without breaking my P0.
Yeah. Right. So from the edge gateway services perspective, we now introduce DHCP static binding. Straightforward, we can now static bind the respective IP addresses in the DHCP section under the IP usage, where you don't have to now only depend on dynamic IP allocation. And this is an enhancement where so basically this auto config NAT firewall feature, right, is a feature which is configurable both on the provider gateway and the edge gateway. So what this feature in short is that this feature basically automatically configures the NAT and firewall for the respective tenant based on the IP scope in the IP space defined. This feature was introduced in the previous version, where once I hit the auto configure NAT and firewall button, it will automatically look at the scope defined within the IP space and configure the NAT and firewall and create them in the NSX side of the solution.
Yeah.
Previously, we could not reconfigure this setting, but from this version onwards, I can do a reconfiguration of the auto NAT and firewall if in case certain parameters, certain scope has changed within my IP space. I have the capability to reconfigure that from the VCD portal itself. Previously, I had to go to the NSX portal, delete those NAT rule, delete the firewall rules, come to the VCD portal, undo the scope, change the scope settings, and then redo the configuration. But now VCD will do the reconfiguration, meaning it will delete the old configuration and recreate the new configuration for you.
Nice and easy.
Yeah, and much awaited service is now finally supported with VCD, the web application firewall. This basically is a feature which is configurable on the service engine, wherein you can enable the web application firewall, and we all understand what web application firewall is. So this is a feature which is now configurable. What other thing we have introduced with the web application firewall is the tenant logging. So with this now, it is easy for the administrator to basically look at the logs and basically look at the logs and understand the analytics itself of what is happening within the application and what action they have to take based on the logs. And the logs are basically now defined as critical, warning, and all the stuff, which is standard mechanism in the web application firewall infra. So we now support enabling WAF and enabling the tenant logs for the respective service engines where the WAF is enabled.
Cool.
Yeah. And we now support routing traffic through ROP protocols within the provider and the edge gateway. Instead of going through the complete IP networking stack, we have the option of routing the traffic to protocols. For now, we only support TCP and UDP, and use cases basically depend on the application type you want, where you want the traffic to route based on ports. So now we support that on both the provider and edge gateway. And from the core networking perspective, we have introduced a concept. This is a concept basically called the networking UI extension points. Before I explain why this is required, let's understand how, if I want to have any extensibility within VCD, what I do is I create a plugin, correct? I get the plugin configured and I see an extra option under the more option with a plugin option, right? The same concept we are now bringing just for the networking features. So let's say, for example, a customer wants to bring in certain networking services. Let's say they want the ability to configure, let's say, their core networking from within the VCD page. They can get that and they can get that integrated within VCD by creating their own plugin and placing it in the networking section of the tenant portal. So it's basically a plug and play of any service they want to bring it into the VCD. But again, they have to go through the same process of using Ansible, writing the extension code, getting it approved with VCD, Steam, and all the stuff. But the only option is now the plugin will be available in the networking section. And if you look at the example, this is like a demo example. These are an example of what you can create within the networking option as an extension point.
Yeah, this is really cool. I mean, a lot of partners have had network teams that kind of look after core networks and edge networks, and IT teams look after the in-cab kind of networking. This will allow them to bring in potentially, other layer 2 providers and functionality into the environment.
Basically, for a single pane of glass configuration, you get this plugin written, plug it into the VCD's UI portal, and then one page you do your core configuration plus the VCD networking configuration. As an example, I'm giving. But there are many use cases, but this is one of the main use cases.
Okay.
And we have now also introduced the HTTP transparent proxy within VCD. The main requirement for this feature was to introduce ARIA operations to communicate with VCD directly. Just an FYI, in the future, we will get rid of tenant app and we will have the chargeback facility built into ARIA operation, which will now directly communicate with VCD. So no more the tenant application or tenant app or chargeback layer, right? For the communication to happen between VCD and ARIA operations, this HTTP transparent proxy had to be introduced within the VCD's code base. So why this is required? Basically, when the tenants have to request or access the chargeback feature in ARIA operations, right? The traffic or the request will go through the HTTP transparent proxy protocol, and then the request will be written back from the ARIA operations to the VCD tenant through this proxy. So this is the main reason why we have introduced this HTTP transparent proxy within VCD. The only thing is, let's say when I'm integrating my ARIA operations into VCD, right? We have to make sure that the ARIA operation SSL certificates are pre-configured within the VCD and the trust is built. Thereafter, communication is basically, I think there is no further configuration required for the HTTP transparent proxy communication to take place.
It's interesting. I was wondering how they were going to do this, right? Because I knew chargeback was kind of going from tenant app, which is something you deploy as a plugin, to being something integral in ARIA operations. And I was wondering how they're going to pull that kind of user interface into VCD. But tell me, have you seen this yet, Jay? Is this like the whole?
Seen this on the SaaS version of CDS.
Okay.
I mean, not CDS. I've seen this chargeback option available under the ARIA operations. As an integration, it's still a work in progress. Things will be released probably in the first quarter of next year. I mean, I should be very clear of what is quarter, maybe in January or February.
Okay, so it's not there yet. Yeah.
It is not there yet. It will be, I mean, this HTTP transparent proxy is built into the system in VCD. The chargeback integration into ARIA ops and that communicating with VCD will release that specific feature from January or February next year.
Got it. Okay, cool. That makes sense.
And we now support NSX tenancy, which is called projects. So how we have VCD tenancy, where we segment the organization, where we have our VApps, network, storage within the organization, segmented and isolated. Same concept we have now, same concept NSX has launched in the name of projects. VCD now supports projects. So basically, how this works in short, when you are creating the organization, right, you have to enable this network tenancy feature and give it a name. Let's say org1, for example. So what will happen thereafter when you're spinning up an organization VDC within that org, which has tenancy option enabled, at the time of selecting the network pool, it'll ask you, hey, do you want to use existing network pools like the Geneva network pool, VLAN network pool, or sorry, the transport zone of Geneva transport zone, or you want to use network tenancy? If you select network tenancy, then you would not have an option of selecting any of the other network pools. Basically, the NSX project within VCD uses the overlay network, right? So for this, you need to have an overlay network pre-configured into the system for you to be able to use organizations with projects. So once this connection is configured, whatever objects you create within VCD in that NSX project enabled organization, VCD will go ahead and create the project in NSX. VCD will go ahead and do all the creation of objects, managing of the objects within NSX. All right. So it's all taken care from the VCD side. So why do we need this? Like how we have isolation and segmentations in VCD from a tenancy perspective, same logic. We have introduced isolation and segmentation from NSX perspective, and of course, easy management, right? Let's say we have thousands of OVDCs within an organization. It's easy management for the organization from a networking perspective.
Yeah, so I'm kind of struggling with that one. So Hamza, so what we have in VCD is that isolation done inherent in VCD. Now we're replicating that isolation basically in NSX projects. Yeah. And that's automated. But why is that simpler for us?
It is simpler for us. At least, okay, look at it from an org admin perspective. Previously, if I had to log into the NSX page portal, for example, I would see the edge gateways, I would see all the objects, configuration, all mixed up for all the organizations, right?
Yeah, got it. Yeah.
That's one isolation wherein if I have to now go to NSX portal, right? Let's say I want to troubleshoot or look at details of org1. In NSX portal, I will drop down and select the org1 project. It will only list all the objects of that org1. So in that way, it's easy management. Of course, NSX has introduced its own isolation and segmentation from a project perspective. Okay.
Got it. Yeah.
So that's how it is. And so this is how it looks like. So the first screen is where you enable the tenancy from the organization level. And when you're spinning up OVDCs, this is where you select whether you want to use tenancy or not use tenancy within the organization.
Okay.
All right. So these were the networking features. And let's now look at some core platform features where we have where we have enhanced the UI. What I mean by enhanced, earlier when we used to log into the respective provider or tenant portal, it used to never let you know to which org you are logged into directly. You have to go to the homepage and a lot of things, right? But now it clearly shows you which org you're logged into from the section where you have your username listed. Small thing, but very useful. And now from VCD page itself, as a provider, you have the capability to enter the VCD cell into maintenance mode or quiet the VCD cells. Earlier, you had to log into the WAMI page or from the command line to do so. And also now you can do the cell certificate management from the VCD page itself. You don't have to really log into the WAMI page or from the command line console. This is a very good thing. We now support more than one IDP integration within VCD and allow to use all the integrated IDPs to the tenants for logging purpose. So earlier we could only use a single IDP at a time, and that was the default if we had to log into the system other than local users. But now with this new enhancement, we have the capability of having multiple IDPs integrated and using all the IDPs at the same time. Also, what we have done is we can, as a org owner, right, we have the capability to change the wordings of how the buttons, the text on the button look like. So that customization is something we allow, and based on what IDPs we have configured, we can click on the respective IDP configured button, and then that will allow you to log into the respective through the respective IDP into VCD. Well, this is again one step forward to kind of eliminate the local user usage. So we are encouraging everyone to start using more IDPs within VCD, because sometime, if not sooner, we will stop usage of local user.
Yeah. Yep.
This is a new feature we have introduced for a larger feature, which I cannot disclose right now, but the main purpose of this feature is wherein as a provider, right? Sometimes, let's say I'm the prime provider admin. Let's say, I mean, head of provider admin, for example. I have access to all of the features to be configured within VCD as an admin, see everyone's organizations, log in as an organization, log into the tenant portal as an org admin or as a provider admin and look at things, right? But what if I want to have other provider admins not do all these tasks? Basically, a controlled provider admin access. So with this, I can control what the other provider admin would see. And the main feature of this is basically the controlled, or rather, I would say the provider admin with Travelcell, right, will not be able to see other organization details, nor be able to log into the organization portal as this provider admin. So it's basically a controlled access, where this controlled provider admin can basically just do the configuration, like you can do the IDP configuration, all the provider admin tasks except for org related stuff, right? So we have introduced this feature for a bigger feature, which will be coming in sometime sooner.
I'm guessing this is so this is kind of like having a super admin and then everyone else being like admins. I guess this is going to like really help with things like the 3-tier tenancy kind of models and stuff like that. Coming soon.
Coming soon again, in quotes. It's for basically a 3-tier tenancy model where we have a super provider, and then the subtenants. So that's how it is. So this is one thing which they have exposed directly into the UI for you to be able to get used to how this feature really works.
Yeah, great.
And from the other enhancement perspective, Content Hub, we all know what it is. It was introduced in the previous version. From this version onwards, we make it mandate for you to accept the end user license agreement, which will be an additional step to follow. And if in case you are using the VMware Marketplace, you will get the EULA management option both at the time of importing from the marketplace and when you deploy the imported application into your VCD environment. So both the times. And if you're pulling the container application from the Helm chart, or let's say container repo, only when you're deploying the container application is when you would get the EULA management approval or management agreement to be accepted.
Yeah.
Okay. And we get as a pop-up as to be accepted. And we now support upgrade and rollback of an existing deployed container application. How we do that? Basically, now we have introduced the concept of revision, which is a standard way of doing rollback and upgrades. So with every change in the application, we update that with a revision number. So if we have to roll back, we have the option to roll back. If you look at the option here, we can update or we can do a rollback, right? So these actions have been introduced in the Container Hub for Content Hub for container applications.
Right.
And let's now look at the storage and extensibility and solutions changes in this version. Wow, I love this feature. So We have now introduced the service within VCD called bring your own encryption. Basically, either bring your own encryption key or bring your own encryption server. So as a provider, you can allow the end customers to decide whether they want to use their own key or server. How this works quickly. There's something called solutions management within VCD. It's a feature where we enable solutions to be enabled for the tenants. So what we do is we basically download the ISO file for this encryption management, deploy the solutions within solution management in the landing page, and publish that to the tenant. Now it's up to the tenant whether they want to use the keys given by the provider, which is, so basically there are two options. One, the provider still manages the KMS, but the key is of the tenant. The second option is the KMS itself is of the provider and also the keys of the provider. So these two are allowed now going forward with this release. To understand a bit of more, look at the blog and to know why it's required and how it benefits and how to configure the step-by-step process.
But Jay, there's a third use case there, isn't there, where the tenant can configure their or VDC with their own KMS and like connect it through to their own KMS system.
Yes, that's a second use case.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so either use the key KMS of provider and tenant's own key, or tenant's own KMS and tenant's
yes. Yeah.
And this we also, with this version, we also support Thales CipherTrust encryption management to which basically we basically now interop VCD 10.5.1 with Thales CipherTrust manager as well.
Yeah. So it's Fortanix, Thales, and basically anything else that speaks KMIP that you can kind of connect to. But those are the ones we're kind of going with, right, from an ecosystem perspective.
Right.
Yeah.
And we will be launching the CAC 4.2 probably in Jan or Feb next year, where it will support the new TKG versions. And the key features were basically it will now have an enhancements for air gap deployment. And of course, we will have full integration of transmission control local. More to come when this release is nearing. So just an FYI, Jan or February next year. And with this version, we have introduced DAC version 1.3, and with that we bring the Kafka service as an offering.
Yeah.
Please note the DAC usage of DAC is free, but not Kafka, right? If you want to use the premium version of Kafka, that will be anyway a paid license from the Kafka side, right? So people usually confuse if we support Kafka through DAC, it's Kafka is free. No, it's not, right? So we all know what is Kafka. Kafka is basically your, I believe, the live streaming database where it helps you in live streaming and do the real-time data visualization. So this is something which we can offer now from this version onwards, where you have to upgrade your existing DAC version to 1.3. And we, like I said, for in the HTTP transparent proxy slide, we will soon, probably in Jan or Feb next year, eliminate tenant app or chargeback as a plugin and integrate chargeback directly into ARIA operations and have ARIA operations talk directly to VMware Cloud Director. It's available in the SaaS version of VCD as an early access, but again, for on-prem, it's next year where we will do the.
So Jay, I know a lot of providers will really like this, but also just want to make sure that we're looking at the migration use case, like tenant app. A lot of people might have their billing kind of configuration all done, assuming the new kind of ARIA operations chargeback functionality is going to be able to kind of migrate that function across.
I'm hoping as well. I did have this question with engineering there. They said, I mean, we're still working and looking at it. I mean, I know we are almost in mid of December, but yeah, I mean, it was supposed to release, to be honest, with VCD 10.5.1, but because of certain challenges, it's been moved to next year. So I'm hoping that there should be a migration path for the chargeback as a plugin to ARIA operations charge.
All right, you're on it. That's great.
And with the 10.5.1, we have a new ARIA Operations Management Pack, which is version 8.1.4. And we all know what this does. Basically, it helps you monitor VCD from within the ARIA operations. And it has a lot of bug fixes, and we support CEIP, enabled property by the Sovereign Cloud Compliance Pack. So that's something which we have enhanced in this version of the management pack. And lastly, this is the storage. I would say it's a new feature. Previously, right, if you had to migrate storage or migrate certain data, the only option available was to as in provider admin, go to the organization and migrate the entire tenant. So whatever objects or policies they had would get migrated. But from this version onwards, we are introducing a option for you to transfer policy to policy. Like I want to transfer from a source storage policy to a target storage policy. So that is something which we are introducing. It's more of a tenant use case where they now have access to do just the policy, storage policy data migration. Obviously, it's understood the tenant wants to migrate from a source storage policy to a target storage policy. Both the policies must be exposed to the respective tenant. So these were the technical features. We'll quickly look at the interop. I will not go through this. These are the supported and tested versions of the other supported solutions with VCD. So just go through these as you need them. And from the upgrade perspective, we support the upgrade to 10.5 from 10.2.2 onwards. Again, the path might be different. For that, look at the interoperability and upgrade path metrics. Yep. What is the real path to upgrade to 10.5, right? So this is the upgrade thing. And for documentation, we all understand it's the VMware documentation site. And in this version, we have introduced API version 3.8.1. And sizing guidelines remains the same as it was in the previous version. So with this, yeah, we come to an end of what's new in VMware Cloud Director 10.5.1.
Wow, I feel completely blown away. There was so much in there. All right. So the big ones for me are really definitely the bring me your own KMS, because that's going to make a huge difference. I guess what's happening with ARIA operations and the integration there, that's a huge one. And then the BGP kind of plays, for partners who have got larger customers who want to do that kind of level of configuration, have their own BGP kind of configurations that they want to manage for multi-sites, etc. That's kind of like
dedicated provider gateway only.
Yeah, sure. Well, if they're that big to have BGP that they worry about, then they're probably going to be having their own dedicated private gateway. I guess, and then there's obviously, what we're going to be doing later on, Jay, is looking at how VCF fits into this picture with 10.5.1 and the expanded scope of the 3-tier kind of white labeling function is going to be really cool. Yeah, a lot there. So what's the next follow-up, Jay? What's the plan?
The plan would be if we can kind of look at the encryption feature in detail, and then help everyone understand how VCD kind of fits into the new VCF program. So we can do that as well. I mean, see, it's open, right? Things are settling down. Even though we are within Broadcom, we ourselves are understanding the strategies and how things will work. Yeah. Soon we can have how the CSP core products will fit into this VCF SKU and see how better we can utilize this within the new offering.
Yeah, exactly. So give the service providers their kind of architectural and solutions and services they can offer with VCD and how that fits into this new world. All right. Okay, well, let's look forward to the KMS kind of next rundown, Jay. I know our viewers would like to find out more about that, so look forward to that one. Jay, thank you very much for taking us through the high-level features of 10.5.1.
Pleasure. Take care. Thanks,
Cheers.
Guy.